So let's start right there. Let's start with the safety position. We know that Xavier Nwankpa committed to Iowa yesterday. It was expected. We weren't giving anybody any indication that that wasn't going to be the case. So what does that mean for Notre Dame? Where do they stand at the safety position for the 22 class? And are they going to even sign a true safety in this class?
They're not going to sign a true safety in this class. And you know, when you look at kind of safety recruiting in general, there's a lot of question marks. Like, okay, did you put all your eggs in the Xavier Nwankpa basket thinking you were going to get him, and then you're not going to get him, and now you're scrambling and that kind of thing? That's not really what happened here. Notre Dame has known they were not in a great position with Xavier Nwankpa immediately following his visit. They kind of came into that visit feeling good. You know, I for a long time I was, hey, I like where Xavier's at. I think that they got a good shot. The visit did not go well, and from that moment on, it was kind of they were out of it. And then they tried at the end to get in there, but it was never going to happen, which is why I didn't write a commitment preview. I didn't foreshadow that decision at all because it was a foregone conclusion.
Right.
So then the question is, okay, well, why didn't they move on to somebody else? Now, they have offered recently Keon Entringer, but that's because he had a great senior year and they like him. Notre Dame's entire sort of dynamic has changed as we've gone through the 2021 season. The safety position has been kind of interesting because it's not a great safety, like it's not a super deep safety class in regards to guys that Notre Dame liked or could get in.
Right.
There's some really good safeties out there, but they just couldn't get a lot of interest. It just wasn't going to happen. That's the opposite story in 2023. There's some elite safeties that like Notre Dame a lot. Okay, so the problem was, okay, how do you get your roster from the point where you can bridge that 2022 and 2023 class? Because there's going to be another full season played before that 2023 class shows up as true freshmen. And so what kind of changed things for Notre Dame was the emergence of Xavier Watts and Ramon Henderson.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're both basically freshmen because of the COVID year, they're basically true freshmen again. Okay. You can go redshirt freshman, whatever the case may be, however you want to define it. It doesn't matter. Essentially, they still have 3 years of eligibility remaining. And I'm told the staff really likes, I mean, Ramon made a smooth transition.
He really, and surprisingly smooth, to be honest.
I mean,
for me, because he struggled at corner. I mean, he was struggling. He just looked uncomfortable. It didn't have a natural fit to it. It just looked uncomfortable. And the fact that he was able to transition as smoothly as he did to starting the last couple of games of the season was really impressive to me. And I'm sure it obviously caught the coach's eye, and I'm sure they're thinking to themselves, wow, now we've got a really young guy that we can work with.
Mm-hmm. So then Xavier Watts obviously made the move before that. Now, Xavier's transition wasn't as smooth because he wasn't playing defense. So the thing with Ramon is Ramon had to learn safety technique, but the calls, the coverages, all that kind of stuff, you already know. I mean, if you play corner, you know what the safeties are doing. And so Xavier had to learn everything from scratch, where Ramon was just kind of transitioning to a different position within the same group, essentially, you know, corner to safety. But they love his talent. They love Xavier's talent. They love his physicality, his speed. And the big thing about those two is you saw a big, huge jump in speed and athleticism when they joined the secondary. That was the big concern about the safety position moving forward is there's just not a lot of athleticism there. Like DJ and Houston are steady players, but they're not elite athletes. Ramon is one of the 7 or 8 fastest players in the entire team. Xavier's not so much a burner as much as he's just a really outstanding athlete.
Yeah.
And they love them both. Then you have Houston and DJ now being open to returning for 5th-year seniors. You've got KJ Wallace has still multiple years of eligibility left. Then you have the 2 freshmen, Kerry G and Justin Walters. Now, they like both of their upsides, even though they weren't ready to play this year. Justin needs to get bigger. Kerry's still learning the position. So all of a sudden, with Xavier and Ramon kind of stepping into that void, then there wasn't a need to take somebody just to take somebody. Plus, they kind of see Jaden Bellamy, who committed as a corner, as more of a safety kind of guy down the road anyway, which is part of the recruitment. I mean, we talked about that when they got him. And so they feel like right now they don't need to don't need to take a guy just to fill a void, a need, right? And so they started transitioning months ago to the 2023 class. They've already got a commitment. They got a commitment in August from Adon Schuler. Big pickup. It was a good pickup then. We liked him. There's some things we liked. He was smart.
Sure.
He was heady. Not an explosive athlete, but a really smart, good football player. Well, if you watched him come, but what we heard at the time was that he blew the coaches away at the Notre Dame camp during the summer. Well, that didn't show up on his sophomore film. Then you fast forward to this fall, and Adon Schuler jumped way up. And to the point where like they love him. He's now a top 150 recruit. So that's a great way to start your class. They already have a commitment in the 2023 class of safety. So people say, Chris O'Leary hasn't landed anybody yet. He didn't land anybody in 2022, but
right,
he got a commitment from Adon Schuler back in August in the 2023 class. So then there's two other kids that they really love at safety, and that is Caleb Downs from Georgia. He goes to Mill Creek High School in Georgia. And then Peyton Bowen from Denton Guyer down in Texas. They have both visited Notre Dame multiple times since the summer. They were both on campus this summer. They have both been on campus for games. Now, obviously, Caleb Downs is the younger brother of Josh Downs, who played wide receiver for North Carolina. So that's he was on campus for that North Carolina game, obviously, because his brother also played in that game. There's going to be a battle for both of those kids. Notre Dame is definitely going to have their hands full with both of those kids, but both of them are very high on Notre Dame. You're talking about stud. I mean, Caleb Downs, I believe 247 Sports has as the number 13 player in the entire country. Peyton Bowen is like 50 something, like 53, something like that. And then Adon Schuler would be 150. The goal is to get at least two of them, but the dream scenario for Notre Dame is to get all three. Because they view that they can play three at a time, and they feel that trio can play together, like all three on the field at the same time, because there's enough diversity of their skill set. But also they can be part of the the 3-man rotation because all three can play both safety positions. So between the three of them, they can get them all a ton of reps and be impactful players. So that's what they've been focusing their time on. That's what Chris O'Leary is. You wonder, like, why isn't Chris O'Leary? We're not hearing his name with 2022 kids because he's putting all his time on 2023 kids. So that's going to be the class where we're going to find out whether or not Chris O'Leary can recruit like you need to recruit at Notre Dame, because I believe they made the conscious decision to then focus on 2023 as opposed to finding some kid that maybe you need to develop and bring along and that kind of thing. Now the Endringer, the kid from Michigan that they offered, they don't view as sort of that project-y kind of kid. He had a breakout senior year. I mean, he had a great senior year. Athleticism jumped. I mean, he's a legit prospect. So they are pushing for him, but it doesn't look like they're necessarily going to get him. So I really like where Notre Dame stands with Peyton Bowen. I think obviously Caleb Downs is going to be a much tougher test for many reasons, but he likes him and they're in the game. That's the key. But they love Caleb Downs. They love Peyton Bowen. And they just figured, hey, look, I'd rather take a 2023 kid that we think is a stud than have to rush into filling a void. Because the other thing, too, is if they get into a pinch, you'd rather fill that void with maybe a grad transfer for a year where that scholarship's only being held for a year. This is one of the areas where the portal can help you a little bit. Because if you have a void, you don't have to scramble to find a high school recruit that you, at the end of the day, you kind of know isn't going to be a big-time player for you. And then you're locked in for 4 years.
Right. Because Notre Dame isn't the kind of place that's going to be pulling scholarships
they don't do
every
that.
year.
Right.
Exactly.
Whereas a transfer portal kid, you can kind of, hey, look, go get a depth kid and fill the void that way. And then at least that guy's got 3-4 years in a college weight room and those type of things. So that's really where it comes from and why they haven't made that push. And I think that's smart. I think it's smart to say, look, we can go we can get a grad transfer, or we can, there's guys that we can move there if we need them to. And there's a lot of good depth at corner. So there were options there besides just using a scholarship on a kid that ultimately you're going to just recruit over in the next class.
Right.
And that's where Notre Dame is at with safety position. So, yes, it's a bit of a precarious position because now there's a lot of pressure on Chris O'Leary you better hit a home run in the 2023 class, which means he needs to get one of Bowen or Downs to go with Schuler. If they don't get both of those two, then they're in a little bit of a problem. And of course, the ideal scenario is that you get both. That's where they would like to be. Because I mean, if you watch Caleb Downs play, he can play free, he can play the alley, he can line up in the nickel and play man coverage. I mean, he's an elite player. And as you saw from his brother, athleticism runs in the family.
Clearly.
So that's where they're at with safety recruiting. So that's why I have an article kind of breaking it all down at irishbreakdown.com. It's the lead story right now. So that's partly why we wanted to lead with that. So I'm not really panicking right now about safety recruiting. I'm not. I mean, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. It makes sense. And of course, there's always risk when you push off needs to the next year. I get that. But when you look at the kids on the board, it makes a lot of sense why they're doing that, because the kids on the board in 2023 are outstanding.
Yeah, right. And I think not that you can count on freshmen that are going to be coming in the summer, but at the same time, having Watts and Henderson on the roster rotating to safety, right, I think eases some of the burden that they might have felt in the first place. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel they're not as worried as they would have been if those two guys are still at corner and at wide receiver, respectively. And I mean, it helps the depth, because now you're looking at a minimum of 7 safeties, right? For this season, for the 22 season, with the possibility of maybe some guys moving as well.
Yeah, Philip Riley could move.
Right.
Clarence Lewis Tucker could move. Clarence Lewis could move. Ryan Barnes could move. The incoming freshman, I mean, if you needed to, there's a couple of those guys could maybe do some things. So yes, there are options, and that's the whole point, Vince, is that's called smart roster management.
Yeah.
You don't just scramble out because you feel the need. You have to fill a need in a class with a kid that ultimately can't play at the level you need at Notre Dame.
Right.
And so I actually like that. Again, now would I have liked to have landed Xavier Nwankpa? Yes.
Of course.
And I can't really get into the reasons why they didn't get Xavier Nwankpa, but I can tell you it wasn't a coaching problem. It wasn't a Chris O'Leary problem or a Marcus Freeman problem or a Brian Kelly problem. It was not a coaching problem. It's just sometimes things happen, and sometimes kids just want to go somewhere else. And people say, well, how could you lose to Iowa? I'm like, well, Ohio State lost to Iowa too.
Right.
So, there's a little bit more to it.
He didn't touch the Notre Dame hat. All right. When he picked up the Ohio State one, threw that one down. So.
Right. I didn't even watch it.
I know. I saw it this morning.
So,
all right, Brian,